If it wasn't for your parents, maybe perhaps some of you, and your grandparents, and all the Mesir Nefesh and everything that they went through, there would have never been a Judaism for me to come to. So, much more so than me come here and stand up to think that I'm trying to give you some inspiration, I want all of you to clap for them because he kept the light on for a person when he wanted to come home. So thank you very much. My journey starts out in Seattle, Washington. I was born and raised there. And even before I was born, or any Nissim came into the world, my mother and my father were hip-hop artists. So I have it honest. Most people ask me, when did you start music or whatever? I like to tell them I was born with a golden microphone in my hand, when I came out. And it's often attributed to my parents, the first rappers in Seattle. Before rap had ever became popular, my father had already started him in his group, and my mother later on started a hip-hop group. So that was sort of the beginning of everything. Along with this, they also sold drugs. Rappers by day, drug dealers by night, whatever. And so as things progressed, I was born, I was brought into the world. This is the lifestyle I was exposed to very early on. And after my mother split with my father, I was 2 years old. She married my stepfather, who was also in the same business. And Baruch Hashem, just like any good Jewish boy, I joined the family business very early on also. I started smoking pot when I was about 9 years old. By the time I was 12, I was already selling. And this was life. When I would get off the school bus from elementary school, I walk off, and you can only imagine coming from the classrooms and the color crowns and everything else, the contrast of walking into my house and seeing kilos of dope on the table and people rolling dice, in the driveway and guns everywhere and people counting money. And it was like this was everyday life. Now, if you completely understand where a person grew up in such an environment, he thinks that this is life. This is the way everybody lives. Everybody's used to these type of relationships, this type of dysfunctionalism, whatever you want to call it. But to me, this had been life. Early in my years, right around 9 years old, my grandfather came to live with me, and this is the first time I have really any touch with religion. My grandfather was a Sunni Muslim. I prayed with him 5 times a day. He would take me to the mosque. He taught me the Quran. And in between that, he also was involved in drugs. I don't know. I don't know how it works, but it worked. This is exciting for me, though, because until this time, I never met my grandfather. He spent already most of his life in prison. So by the time he came to live with us, it was like the most exciting thing, and much more than it was about religion at that time for me. It was exciting just to be able to have that time with my grandfather, get to know who he was. And like I said, it's a very, very different thing. I remember all the way growing up, all the way at least until my teenage years, I would gravitate towards older people. And I would love to hear stories. But when I was young, my grandfather, I remember I had story time with him one time, and it was like this. We went to his brother's apartment. We were out, and this is Tacoma, Washington, maybe almost an hour outside of Seattle. And we were sitting there, and I thought he was going to give me this amazing story. He gave me candy, and he sat me on his lap, and he wanted to tell me something. I remember he told me something. All I remember was the beginning of the story. The beginning of the story went something like this. He said, son, when I was young, I really liked to kill people. I remember after that, the rest of everything else went blank, story time with, with Grandpa, So shortly after this, find it not odd, my grandfather ended up back in prison. This was right around 1996, 97 or so. He ended up in prison. And from that time on, if anybody had asked me what I was, I would tell them I'm a Muslim. And although I had no connection to Islam, I still had a connection to my grandfather. It was a very short connection. I had in between the calls, he would collect calls from the prison, but whatever, I'd be on the phone with him, and he'll tell me different things, other things that he's learning, but I wasn't so involved religiously. Now, outside of this, I had an uncle who was a preacher, so every once in a while when I was young, they would come pick me up for Sunday school, but I just really loved the Kiddush after Sunday. It was very nice. So I would go every once in a while. But I had no connection really to Christianity at this point. But even as a kid, I was a very deep thinker. I was always into learning new things and exploring topics of religion and God and different things like that. Whenever I had somebody that would sit there and talk to me, every once in a while, these guys, in and out of my life, you can understand there was high turnover of who was going into jail and who was coming out. So everybody gets very spiritual for some reason after they get out of jail. I don't know what it is, but it happens. So I would have these conversations all the time with uncles and people that were like my uncles, whatever. And so by the time I was 13, and music for me, it became like my life. And like I said, my parents had already rapped, so there was no introduction really needed. It was just a natural talent that I had as a boy. And one day, my stepfather had seen, maybe one of my raps or in the paper, or he had listened to me from a distance, and he realized he talked to my mother, and I said, this guy's really good. We need to try to do something, to be able to nourish his talent. So from that, I was able to get connected with a producer by the name of Vitamin D. I was 13 years old when I recorded my first professional record. Vitamin D by this time had already, did stuff with guys like Busta Rhymes, and I think he had sat on some sessions also too with Dr. Dre. He wasn't as big as he began to be, but he was active. I'm sure you guys don't know who none of these people are. It's a good hidden. Don't know who these people are. So after recording with Vitamin D, and everybody now, this just only added to me even more, so I'm even more excited about music. I had a good friend of mine who knew how much I love rapping and how much I love hip-hop, so he invited me to this hip-hop program. Now, this hip-hop program was not just any hip-hop program. It was amazing. They had all the gear, the equipment, and different things like that, but it happened to be at a place called the Union Gospel Mission. Now, the beautiful thing is that these guys never mentioned one word to me about God. But even greater than that, they gave me an opportunity to be away from all the drama, all the nonsense that I was dealing with in my home every single day. And so this place became, to some degree, a safe haven. So I ended up going there, and then, like I said, it became an everyday thing, and in and out, hip-hop, and it gave me an opportunity just to write and just to be a kid to some degree. And I got really close with one of the counselors there. And one day, he came up to me, and he asked me if I would like to go with him to camp. So I got completely silent. I'm looking at him. He's looking at me. And I told him, black people don't camp. We don't camp. You want me to go outside, sleep in the wilderness with insects on purpose. Black people don't camp, So after this, he showed me like this brochure, this camp. And this is not a camp. It's a getaway. It's a vacation, So I see this thing, and after that, I do everything I can to collect money from everybody I can to go to this camp. Now, this camp happened to be a missionary camp, and I'll never forget the speaker. His name was Bill Page. He's a very sweet man. And the recipe is that this guy goes up, and he speaks for 8 days. I think the camp was 8 days. It was in the middle of Oregon, Washington. Oregon is already just kind of in the middle of Washington, California. But anyway, it was in the middle of Oregon, Washington. I still love my people from Portland, but it's just like it takes way too long, when I'm trying to get to LA from Seattle. Anyway, so in the middle of nowhere, we're here in this camp, have all the amenities, everything. And when you take a person out and you stick them in a place where the environment becomes one that they're not familiar with, but it's open, you have fresh air, it's very beautiful, it becomes an immersive environment, right? So the person is able to speak things to a person that's going to naturally get to a person's heart because they're already to some degree open. So I was there at this place, and he would tell a story. The recipe was he'd tell a story every single day, just a one piece, time at a time. And we're all leading up to that massive altar call that's going to happen on day 8, okay? But each story is like filled with, with passion and everything that he was going through in his life. And every time after we finished the talk, he gave us a list of questions. And when I got the list of questions, and we went back to our cabin time room, it's like Onig, whatever, went back to our cabin time, we'd all talk. And for the first time, I'm discussing the way that I grew up in my home environment as a place that is not normal, not necessarily a functional lifestyle, And so that was the biggest thing for me, that I'm able to say these things for the first time to the other guys that was there. However, they grew up very much so like I did. And so it was very, very powerful for me. So find it not odd that on day 8, I remember in the night of the night, it was day 7 in the night, And I started talking to one of the counselors, and I was talking to him about heaven and about hell and about blah, blah, blah. And because, well, missionaries, if anybody knows anything about missionaries, for every question that they ask you, they already have the answer. I don't know if anybody's ever talked to them or anything like that. So, like, when you ask a 13-year-old boy, like, what's going to be with his afterlife? Is he going to heaven or going to hell? He may not have thought about it, but they'll give you an answer very, very quickly, right? So I started to ask questions, and I got all my answers at that time that were satiating. So by day 8, I went down boo-hooing, crying, and screaming out and doing the whole altar call thing, which was very, very good for me. Why? Because I had that moment and it was so impactful, and this is right before I'm going into high school, it got me away from all the knuckleheads that I was hanging around at that time. I became so devoted to Christianity, so devoted to my Bible, true Bible thumper. So after this impactful moment that I had, I became very, very involved with all the youth programs there and everything. I became, very, very strong to some degree. So strong that I was like not passing half of my classes because I was reading my Bible through them, type of thing. Real Bible thumper. And as time went on, I think by the end of my 9th grade year, things had started to wane because also, too, I had a passion and a love for football like nothing else. I'm playing football. I got on the varsity team, and I'm playing, with amazing athletes. And I'm like, now I'm starting to shift my focus to being in the weight room. And between that and music, everything's starting to take my time. So now I have this amazing love here for football. And between that and music, you're trying to figure out how to fit God in this and the whole Christian thing. And something happened to me my 10th grade year. My 10th grade year, I don't know what it was. I spoke about this many different times. But it was just a moment that I had. And I don't know how to describe it much more than the words I can use to express it that I'm going to use today. But I just walked into my high school. And I remember walking through the doors. And all of a sudden, this moment just happened. It hit me. And I felt so disconnected from every single person that was around me. And I felt like there was something that I knew. There was some das. There was some knowledge that I had that nobody else in there had. And I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I didn't fit in with everybody else there. Now, trust me, I looked a lot more like them than I do everybody in this room. And I felt a very strong feeling that I did not fit in with everybody that was around me. So I'm like, walking through them, and I think, maybe 5, 10 minutes, whatever, something like this passed. I ate a chicken nugget and went away, right? But it was so strong and so impactful that it made me, all of a sudden, it just gave me a boost. And that boost led me back to going to the Christian center I was involved in, Union Gospel Mission. And after this, I became very involved. During the summers, I started working as an intern. I got smicha, I became a junior missionary, everything. And now I'm starting to makarv. Half of my high school is going to every single program, every single club thing that they're having there for this. And I devoted myself to this day and night. And I became the poster child for the Union Gospel Mission. There were billboards of me. And I was in the Christian magazines for the private schools, the Catholic colleges, and everything. And I was like on my way. I was going to be the next Bill Page or something. T.D. Jakes, I don't know what it was going to be. I know you don't know none of this clever neither. But I was on my way, and I felt, for me, there was just one major thing that they wanted me to take on as a part of my next step, my next role of leadership, and that was to join a solid church that I can go to, because up until now, there was no way in the world that I was going to devote all my time to going to church, because NFL happens on Sundays. And that was one of my major things. It was like, I told God I can give him every day of the week, but Sundays is off limits. I can't do it. So going into my 11th grade year, probably the biggest and the greatest thing that ever happened to me is the summer I met my wife. She came into my life, and more than anything, there's a lot of beautiful things and a lot of beautiful attributes to my wife. But I think the greatest thing for me at the time, at least, the way that I knew that she was the one, is that she was a Seventh-day Adventist and she went to church on Saturdays. So because of that, I knew for sure that she was the one for me. So time went on, we grew, and my music started to become even much more of a passion for me. And it just so happened that a demo of mine made it to the table of A&R at Virgin Records, right? Now, I have to give you an example of how spiritual I was, because you're not I mean, maybe the billboards or different things didn't tell you. My junior missionary card, my smicha, doesn't do it for you. I remember one day, it was very early in the morning actually, and we got up early because we had a track meet, and I wanted to get there. And maybe I had a test to finish at school, and for whatever genius reason, I stayed all the way across town at my cousin's house, and so I needed to get a ride back to school to get there early, finish this test so I could make it whatever for the track meet. And we're in our car, and we're just riding, and just all of a sudden, we just notice several minivans now. It's very unusual for Seattle. I mean, there's people there, family people are there, but it's not the five towns, you know what I'm saying? So I'm looking at all these minivans, Honda Odysseys, whatever. We'll talk about that later, everybody. But, so I noticed all these minivans surrounding us, and everybody, we're all thinking it's weird, and we're just like, this is a lot of vans. All of a sudden, the lights start to flicker, and they're going off on the minivans, and all of a sudden, these guys jump out, and they have guns, and they're pointed at us. And so they scream, and they yell out the badge, U.S. Marshals, U.S. Marshals, U.S. Marshals. So I'm thinking, I've done a lot of things in my life, but I didn't warrant the U.S. Marshals. So it turned out that the car we were in was in the name of my uncle, and the U.S. Marshals were looking for him. And since his name was registered on the car, they pulled us over, and they've been following us, whatever the whole story. So we get out, we give in our IDs, and I have a warrant on my driver's license for a failure to appear in court from 3.5 years ago when I was a knucklehead before my Christian camp days. It was a case even that I was told that it was completely thrown out. There was a witness there that said I didn't do anything. I was one of those things, I was in the wrong place, wrong time with the wrong person. And so everything had got thrown out to my knowledge, but all of a sudden I had a failure to appear in court, something I never knew about. So the police come, they called the local police, and they come and they arrest me, and they take me to juvenile, and they put me in the orange jumpsuit and everything like that. And I remember walking in, and these kids were crazy, you understand? Crazy. And I'm looking around, and kids screaming and biting and busting their heads in. It's like insane asylum, walking into this place. And I remember, even by the time I got to my cell, I felt such a peace and such a calm. I had been talking to God from the moment I had handcuffs on me all the way until the time I got into the juvenile. And by the time I hit my cell, it was like there was such a calmness inside of my soul, inside of my spirit. Unlike with all the chaos, everything that was going on. I remember seeing down by the bed, there was this little stool there. There was a Bible. There also was a toilet, but back then there was no halakhic issues with that. So I picked up the Bible, right? And I start reading it, and I'm going back and forth, pacing inside this place. And I can't begin to describe the hana that my soul felt, that I felt inside, in the peace. I can't even do it justice. And I remember in the next morning, there was a buzz at the door, and they told me I had a visitor. So I ended up going upstairs with the guard, and I walk into the room, and I'm waiting for whoever this visitor is. And the visitor comes in, and it's my counselor from the Union Gospel Mission, a man by the name of John Reed. He comes in, and he looks at me, and he starts cracking up. He's laughing so hard. And he's laughing so hard that I start laughing with him. I don't even know what he's laughing about. So he's laughing, I'm laughing, we're laughing back and forth. And finally, he calms down, and he stops. And then I asked him, I said, well, why are we laughing? What are we laughing about? And he said to me, you remember, over the last few weeks, you've been telling me that you just wanted to spend time with God alone. He said, be careful what you pray for. And after we had the whole conversation, whenever we go back down, I knew my court hearing is coming up. And they called me again later on that day to go up for my court hearing. And there were two guards there, two big, brothers, black guys. Then over there and they come up to me and they said, I don't know where you came from, and I don't know what you did to get in here, but you don't belong here. You don't belong here. I don't know what it is about you, but you don't belong here. It was something that even these two guys, they felt, taking me to the courtroom. Long story short, they threw out everything. The whole community came. They rallied behind me. There's plenty of letters. Hashem and I got out of there very, very easily. No record, no anything. to give you an example of how on fire I was for God, that even in such a place, a tumma, completely, I still felt very connected to God. Even as a Christian, I felt connected to God. Now, fast forwarding, as the music goes out, I had a demo. Remember, I had a demo CD, and it made it to the desk of an A&R from Virgin Records. We started getting calls from this A&R. And what was big in hip-hop at that time was a guy by the name of 50 Cent, another guy you never heard of. So, as anybody knows that deals with anything in the record industry, nobody's ever usually looking to create something new. They always want to make and take from whatever's hot, what's something established, something they already know that people are going to listen to. So the only issue that this guy had, or he took with my demo, because I had nonstop amazing producers that were producing the music, so he couldn't say really anything about that. He said that the issue was it's just a little bit too positive. If there's any way I could pepper it up, maybe curse word here, curse word there, and all that, you know? And I'm like shocked. I'm thinking to myself, I am junior missionary. I am very, very, I have values. I have all these different things. I start to tell him. And he told me, he'd give me some time, we'll think about it, whatever. And then he sent over, back in those days we used fax machines. So he sent over a fax to the manager that I had at that time. And it said on there $500,000, it was a proposal deal. They showed me the deals that they had and different things like that, and what he wanted to offer. And I started cursing very, very fast. You should know. All of a sudden, started cursing. So as I took on this harder persona, even with the music, slowly but surely, a lot of the same chevra I was around at that time, when I was younger, started to slowly come back into the picture. Guys that did a little bit more than just rapping about this stuff, And so I found myself back into this place, making music and creating somewhat of an image. And the whole time that I was doing it was very interesting. I never really felt as connected to it. I was a completely different person. At this time, like I told you, I'd already met my wife-to-be. And with her, I was a completely different guy. By the time I was in the studio and acting around and going out to these things, I was putting on an act. But at that time, still, it was not me. Later on, things spread a little bit more. And I remember I was in the studio. I was 19 years old. And at this time, I was always pulling, what we call all-nighters in the studio. I was in the studio all night. And there was one particular day that I noticed my mother was dozing off a little bit more than usual. And my mother, at this time, she was addicted to narcotics. And she struggled with this addiction for many years. But on this particular day, I never seen my mother like this. She was falling over. And I was on the phone with my girlfriend at the time. And I told her, I said, one day I feel like I'm going to try to wake up, and she's not going to wake up. And surely that morning, my mother died. Age of 37, I was 19 years old. And the pain that I had was so deep. It was a pain. I still remember that. I never wished on my worst enemy. I would have never wished the pain that I felt. Because by this time, after I got my years of age, whatever, I was 19 years old. My mother had become my best friend. I could talk to her about everything. She knew everything. She was so excited for everything that was going on with me. So it was very, very painful for me. And I had an aunt who, she was pretty well off, so she decided that she'd take it upon herself to offer me that anything I needed help with in my musical career, to help me, she would do. So I asked her to help me pay for plane tickets to go to New York. I'd never been to New York, but this is where all the big record labels were. And I had a good manager at that time that had good connections in the industry. And so we decided to go to New York and to meet with different record labels. I remember I came to New York, I met with Slim Shady Records, I met with Atlantic, and I met with also DDMG, which was Dame Dash Music Group. This is after Jay-Z and Rockefeller split. More clever you don't know. And so I remember going in, and nothing was as hopeful as meeting DJ Clark Kent, who was responsible for finding Notorious B.I.G. and Jay-Z. And we sat 2 days I was with him, and I hung out with him. We listened to records, other records he was working on, different things like that. And there was a conference call that was going to make the final decision on if I was going to be able to get a deal with them or not, and it didn't happen. Dame Dash said no. We pulled out. We came back to Seattle, and by the time we got back to Seattle, all the interest that I have in Virgin had also fickled. Shortly after that, a good friend of mine, my brother-in-law, Yosef, he's around here somewhere, we were producing tracks, and we had another good producer, a good friend. It was a producer named Jake One. And through him, we got connected with a guy by the name of D. Prosper. D. Prosper was the A&R at that time for G Unit. And through him, we were able to get 2 of our tracks sent to G-Unit guys, Young Buck, 50 Cent Chevra, and The Game. And so this started to spread, not only around the city, but this started to become a national thing. Our name was getting out there as producers and as artists, different things like that. And whenever you start to have some success in the world, obviously you have to have the other side that comes with it. So there was another artist who was in the city at that time. He was a local guy. He wasn't so big. But what was huge in rap at that time was to make, battle tracks of disrespecting of the artist in the song. And that way you draw attention to yourself and people want to know who this person is who's saying that, will he responds. And I remember after hearing the song that this artist he made about me, I went into the studio and I'm getting ready to write my response and everything like that. And a friend comes in to me and he says, why don't we just go beat the guy up? He'll stop making the songs, And I thought to myself, this is a chiddush. Nobody ever does this, So I got with the rest of the chevra. We went out. We went and found this guy. We went to the nightclub, and we got into a big brawl outside this nightclub. And by the time we got up there, we were maybe the 3rd car guys that already go up there and fight with this guy. Poor dude. And so after this, we leave. We all go our separate way. We hear sirens, and we run. When I got back to the office we were in, we had an independent office that we released all our stuff through independently. And we got back to this office. I remember sitting in there, debriefing, coming down from all the excitement of everything that just happened. And I got a phone call. That phone call came from another producer I knew who was a local guy in the city. And he said to me that the police were looking for me. So I'm thinking, police don't look for people because they fight in the bar. You know what I mean? This is not something they're going to come do. So I'm saying to the guy, I already don't believe him that he's saying this to me. I'm saying, well, the police, why would they be looking for me for? Because I fought outside a nightclub. He said, no, they said you had a gun and you were shooting at the nightclub and you were that. And I know I didn't even have a gun, but, when in doubt, you run. So as soon as I got out of this place, I ran out. And I remember as soon as I got out of the door, I looked off the building and I seen that the police lights were very, very close, but they weren't close. They weren't there for me, but I seen that there were police lights flashing off the wall. So I broke the code of the streets. I was raised, you always walk away from the police lights, but I started walking towards it because I wanted to see what's going on. I was a little nosy. And as I got closer and closer and closer, I seen that it was a really good friend of mine. So the story went that after we left, he went up there to go kill the guy after we left. Now, the only thing was, the guy was a horrible shot and he missed. He hit the poles, he hit the fire hydrants, he hit the curb, he hit his car, but he missed the guy, right? So now I'm thinking shkoyach, right? Because everybody knows that this is a very, very, very close friend of mine. They know that we were connected. So it had every appearance that I sent this guy to go and pull the trigger. And now that he missed, and now he's in custody, it's the only natural thing is that these guys are going to come after me. And if I don't go and take their life, then they're going to come and take my life. And when a person hits these moments, Hashem will show you who you are very, very fast. I became Mr. Missionary again very quick, all of a sudden. I remember sitting in my living room, and I remember I walked into the doors. The first time I walked into my living room after the whole situation had happened, and I fell down onto the floor, and I just started crying. I just started crying, and I started praying, and I started begging God for a different way. Because although I can rap about this, and I can put on this persona, but inside of me, I didn't have it in me to go and hurt another person, nor did I want to have the type of situation that every time I'm out, I have to have a gun just in case I run into this person. So I stayed there, and I was crying and crying and crying. And on the 3rd day, God performed a major miracle. On the 3rd day, I got a call from this other individual. And he wanted to know what the situation was, and we're able to sit there and talk. Now, the reason why I say this is a miracle, because nobody ever calls you to ask you if you're trying to kill them. That's not it's not a kasha, right? So I'm thinking, in the streets, the code of the streets is shoot first, ask questions last. This guy got on the phone with me, and he's wanting to know what the situation. It wasn't pleasant. It wasn't like he called and said, hey, I was just wondering maybe, or trying to shoot me maybe. It wasn't like that, obviously. But we had a conversation, and I was able to dead the whole situation. I remember getting off the phone feeling, to some degree, relieved. But I started thinking, I made a cheshbon, if I continue and I continue to pretend like this is who I really want to be, then the next time this could be the real thing. So I stayed there in my living room, and I cut away from all my friends, maybe 1 or 2 friends I would talk to, but I stopped talking to everybody. And I was pacing back and forth, and I started praying, and I was praying, and I kept praying. And during this time of me praying, what happened is all the questions that I started to have as I started to dig really deep into my Bible, and I was in that elite Bible study group and all these leadership programs, I had very, very deep questions that I would pull counselors, other people that were older than me, more seasoned, and I would ask them, and they were never able to provide these answers for me. So now I'm on an island to some degree of my own. I have nobody around to talk to about these things. So I went in doubt, you go to rabbigoogle.com. So I went to Rabbi Google, and I start typing in all my different questions. And before you know it, I was spending maybe 8 hours a day. I ordered a Chumash, I ordered a Quran, and I'm sitting there going back and forth through all these different books, different religions. And my wife at this time, we're married, we're newlyweds. She thought I was just going nuts. She didn't even want to talk to me. She just kind of stayed at a distance. She was very happy to see that she could see that there was a change going on with me as I was starting to gather all this information. But to some degree, she thought I was going mad. And I remember the day came for me to tell her. And I made sure I sat on the far enough couch, from her, just in case anything went flying across the room. And I said to her, she grew up, my wife, just to say, she grew up my wife's originally from Louisiana. She grew up very strong, Southern Baptist, fall out on the floor, shake your hand, that type of thing. So she was very familiar with that type of circle. So it was a very strong Christianity for her. And I remember sitting her down, I sat under the couch, and I told her, I no longer want to keep Christmas, and I don't want to keep Easter. She said, I don't want to keep you, And she was so upset, because for her, the time of holidays, much more than even just the religious aspects, it's a time for her to get with her family and, have her mother's macaroni and cheese and all those other type of things, and macaroni and cheese. It was geschmack, I'm not going to lie, but... But this was the thing for her that was very, very painful. And on top of that is something completely foreign to her, all this other nonsense I'm talking about. And it was some time where she kept her distance from me. And I remember after her reviewing all the different things, I seen her, going through things that I was learning, and some she started to learn with me a little bit. And one day she came to me and she said, I feel like I've been lied to my whole entire life. I feel like my whole entire life. And she became so upset with Hashem because she felt like he allowed her to be born without knowing, the truth. And one of the biggest things for me, what I focused on, was I started to dig up Christianity from the root, from the shorish. I wanted to see what was what. And as you dug things up, and I always say this, if you dig up Christianity, you dig up Islam from the root, you discover that Har Sinai is there. You start to see that Yiddishkeit is there. And so for us, we're on an island of our own. We didn't know what to do, right? So it says in the Torah, you're not allowed to work on Shabbat. So I stopped doing the dishes every Saturday, right? I didn't have chazal. I just was running with what I felt like, It's an avoda to scrub greasy pots. It's a serious avoda. So I'm thinking, this is great, And we're like on an island of our own. We didn't know really which way to go. We're just starting to think. We see that the Torah is real and everything. By this time, we haven't really clarified for ourselves whether or not JC is the Messiah or not. There wasn't so much of an issue as much as we're finding out that there's a Torah, there's a Jewish people, there's a Yerushalayim. This means something to God. And my wife was always very close to her sister. Her sister, they're maybe 10 months apart, Irish twins, whatever, call it whatever you want to. They're not Irish, but... Her sister was very, very close to her, but she also, too, was very episodic, always looking for truth also, too. So she started to talk to her sister about all the different things that we're learning, and now it's 3 of us, and her sister at that time was dating my best friend since kindergarten, my brother-in-law Yosef now, and now it's 4 of us, and none of us know what to do. So we're trying to figure out which path do we go. And I started going to this Messianic congregation. It was very, very close, but it seemed like this was the only place I was going to be able to go and start to ask some of the questions that I had. And I ended up at this place, and then my family came, and we were there for about 2 years. And during the time we were there, I also started to look for myself. I remember the first time I walked into this place, as they tell you, I walked in as a foreigner, I had no real introduction to Judaism in itself. I'd never been inside a synagogue. I grew up in the neighborhood I grew up in was predominantly a Jewish neighborhood or area, and I used to walk through a synagogue every day. But I hadn't really experienced Judaism. I see guys sometimes with a hat on, walking the shoe, whatever. That was the extent of it. So I walk into this place, right, and there's people, davening, but back and forth. They're just shuckling, whatever. They have sheets on, small beanie caps, and I'm trying to figure out all the books there, hieroglyphics, whatever. And so I'm sitting there, and whatever, and they come and they grab this Sefer Torah, whatever, they pull it out. It's a very beautiful place. It's a Messianic place, but they're very beautiful. Look like a real shul, whole thing. And after they read from the Haftarah, they read from the New Testament. So that was like the only part I was familiar with inside the whole entire place. So after that, I got very, very close to a lot of people there, some of the leadership and different things like that. And at the same time, I still never stopped searching for what the truth was. And I remember, like, every time I went to the internet, no matter what I typed in, Chabad.org came up. It was just like, I don't know if everybody else has that same experience, Type in J, Chabad.org. Elvis Presley, Chabad.org comes up, whatever. So I'm on Chabad.org, And I started to see also, too, there's a local Chabad close to us. I think my brother-in-law is the first one that actually found it on the east side from us. So, during the week we go over there, and on the Saturdays, whatever, we're going back and forth to this other place. So we're able to start to hear real Torah. And just something inside, started to change inside of me. And over the 2 years that I was at the place, it started to look further and further and further away from what I was looking for. And what I was after, even when I started to ask myself these questions, I was after God and authenticity. After reading the Bible and going through it over and over and over again, right? I started to look for this authenticity. What is the natural progression of what comes out of the Tanakh to a religion today? Is it Christianity? Is it Islam? Is it Judaism? So these were these initial questions. And the more and more I leaned and started to come towards Judaism, the more distant this place started to look from what I was actually after. And it all came to a head this one particular time. They made for the first time United Messianic Conference, and the first time it was going to be in Seattle. All right, they did it many years, but this was the first time it was going to be in Seattle, and the congregation that I was connected to was going to be the host congregation. I remember us sitting in the room, and I remember before, this is all the preparation, the meetings, and all the other stuff before the conference will come, and blah, blah, blah. And so one lady stood up, and she said that there will be Orthodox rabbis sitting in the lobby, and whatever you do, don't talk to them. Don't say hi. Don't say Shabbat Shalom. Don't wish them a good day. Nothing. He said, because they're only trying to take you away from JC. So this conference was a four-day conference. And we had decided that instead of going into the conference, we would go and hang out with the rabbis for 4 days, because now I have another rabbi apart from Rabbi Google I can start to give my questions to, so I'm going to take it. So the rabbi's name was Rabbi Michael Skoback. He's the Jews for Judaism educational director in Toronto. And the other rabbi was another rabbi. He was a Chabad rabbi by the name of Eli Cohen. I think he's in Melbourne or Sydney. He's somewhere in Australia over there. I don't know how close those places are. It's probably like night and day, but he's somewhere over there in Australia. So I remember sitting with them. It was me and my brother-in-law talking to them. We're bouncing questions off them for 4 days. We're going back and forth and asking every single question that I had. And it was so powerful, the time that I had with them. And I remember at the end of it all, and I was saying, I need an insurance policy, because they tell me if I don't believe in this guy, I'm going straight to hell. This is a one-way ticket to hell, if I don't believe in this guy. But at the same time, I'm no dummy. I'm no fool. And the more and more that I've grown, I've seen the beauty of Torah, and I see that this is emes, and I see Hashem's love for Klal Yisrael. I want to be a part of that. So I don't understand what's the conflict. I'm just trying to hold on to my insurance policy. And I remember Rabbi Eli Cohen said to me, he said, you ever read the story of Ruth? And I said, yeah, of course I read the story of Ruth. And he started to tell me, she says that your God is my God. And I'm starting saying, well, yeah, your God's my God, your people's my people. Yeah, well, you go, yeah, I know this. Shkoyach, Rabbi, I know this. Okay? And he said, you have to make your own version. And he said, your version may sound like this. He said that I will accept what the Jewish people accept, and I will reject anything that the Jewish people rejects. And he says that any belief And that, to that degree, right, and belief in him has been rejected unanimously by Klal Yisrael. Nothing theological, anything deeper than any of our discussion that we had over the last 4 days hit me like when he said that. And I remember going back home, and I never ended up going back to the place. And I spent time with my brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and my wife, or whatever, trying to figure it out. And one day my wife came to me and she said, I want an Orthodox conversion. And I'm like, she's very serious about this, you know. And I remember, you know, thinking to myself, I've seen a lot of things in my life, but I have never seen a black Jew, you know. And Hashem's amazing hashgacha, I was checking out groceries one day, you know, at the self-checkout. This is like Erev Shabbos, Akiva and Tzitzit, right? And all of a sudden, in the midst of me checking out groceries, I hear, Shabbat Shalom, brother, you know. So I turn around, it's a black Jew. Right? I start talking to this individual. His name was Yaakov London. Yaakov London's become Uncle Yaakov. He also made Aliyah to Yerushalayim. Hashem now lives in Rechavi. He has an amazing story of his own. But he invited us to come to Shabbos. And this is, I'm having Shabbos for the first time, you know, back in the community, Orthodox community, with him, about a block and a half away from the house that I grew up in my whole entire life. So I'm very familiar with the area. And from him, there was another family invited us, and then there was another family, and a different family. And so now, before you know it, we're in and out of the community on a regular basis. And inside the internal battle of trying to fight, you know, this conflict that you had of leaving one religion and one belief system to another, I can't describe it for anybody who's never been to it, but some degree, it's almost like going through a divorce. It's some type of a separation that happens inside a person. So I remember, out of all this confusion and everything that it was, I remember saying to Hashem, I said to God, I want to start over. I took Tanakh, and I said, I'm going to read this from cover to cover. From cover to cover, but I'm only looking for one thing. I'm looking for your character. I want to know who you are. And I want to know what you love, what you hate, what you reward, what you punish. Because I feel like through everything that I've gone through and all of my searching, my journey, that I no longer know who you are. So I started going through it. At the same time, I started fasting. I know it don't look like it, but look at Hashem. My wife makes a mean kugel. Joking. I was fasting at this time. I would take several weeks. I did this for several weeks, 3 days in a row. I went without food. Every day, on top of that, every day, I was going out crying to God from the bottom of my heart with real tears. I worked at this time for a company where I had access to the whole entire building. There was one particular room. They had a fireplace. I would strike a fire in the middle of the night. I didn't know anything from people to do the wrestle of any of this. I was just going to talk to God. I was fasting, begging, petitioning Hashem, and it was like every single day with every little tiny conversation, every little thing, I was able to have gilui. I was able to have some type of revelation of emes, and I was able to see things. And as this kept on going on, and this was affecting, obviously, me, my family, my wife, and everything that was going on, my wife shortly had found a place for us to move into in the community. And we thought we'd go for it 100%. Only issue is that as Jews, we have a problem of living in neighborhoods that nobody can afford. I don't know if anybody understands this. All right? So the only way for us to get a place in the community was that we had to find a house big enough and cheap enough for both of us to rent, both families to rent. It was me, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, and my wife. We all moved into this place, and we both had one child each. So we found a place. We took the upstairs. They took the downstairs, and we shared the middle. Now, on the middle, there was a kitchen. And I don't care what anybody says. I don't care how much two people love each other. Two women in the same kitchen does not work. Ask Yaakov Avinu. He will tell you very quickly. Two women in the same kitchen does not work. As time went on, we enjoyed each other's company and everything. We were very close, and we were all on the same path and same journey. Until one day we went and met with the rabbi, who finally, after time, said he would meet with us and talk to us about conversion. And he sat us down and he said to us, he said, you know, I'm happy that you guys like each other a lot, and you guys are able to make this whole home thing. Little did he know everything was going to, like, happy to know that you're making this work for all of you. He said, but you have one issue. You guys are both two separate families. And if you go to the Beit Din, both of you guys, as two separate families, then if one of you finishes first, and one of you guys become Gavrien and the other family is not, you're going to have an issue with one cooking inside the kitchen, and what's going to be when it's the Yamim Tovim and everything else, and Paysach, what's going to be with the other family is not converted yet. He said, you got a big issue. He said, so my suggestion is, this is Rabbi Binzikin of Seattle, Washington. He was amazing with us. And he said to us, my suggestion is that you find 2 separate houses and try to make it work. So, of course, just like anybody ever knows, I don't know if you know about me, I don't know, you've maybe been on the other end of the spectrum, but I grew up, in an African-American community all year long waiting for tax season. You know what I'm saying? Waiting for them taxes because we got back, So I was waiting for tax season. Tax season came around, and I took my whole entire everything, and we moved into a brand new apartment, So we got into a new apartment, and my brother and sister-in-law, they stayed in the same place. And time went on. We're both spending time there in the community. And at this time, I had left music. I'm not involved in music anymore. And I started going to the shul, more often, more regular. My wife's coming and everything. And finally, someone comes up to us and says that it's time for us to go to the Beit Din, the time had come, and we're going to go before the rabbis. We went in, we were interrogated, we went through, and at the end we made it through. The rabbi called us, Rabbi Binzikin told us, they liked you, it's a good thing, so stay on standby. Now the next month, my brother and sister-in-law were due to also go before the rabbis. Something happened in Kashrus, and there would need to be an emergency meeting between the rabbis and the community. And so after that, we knew the person was the secretary at the time. She decided that, well, they might as well meet the next candidates. So only a few days later, my brother and sister-in-law also went in to go meet with the rabbis. And they also really liked them. So the Abbe did. He stood up and said, this is just too good to be true, and we have to do this as one family. So on the same day, me, my wife, my brother-in-law, sister-in-law went to the mikveh on the exact same day. We made a double chasana, right? Double Sheva brachas, but it was together. And this was our conversion into Judaism. So you can only imagine we're feeling all the high and everything that's going on in the world. And me, myself, I was very, very excited about everything that happened. And at this time, it was right around this season, I had a lot of friends who were pushing me to go back into music, right? Now, it was a very, very interesting time because what was happening also in Jewish music, there were people who were starting to lose their religiosity. I was petrified. I was so scared to touch music again because I seen that some of the people, and some know of only the bigger artists, but I started to know other guys that were also connected to the music scene that were involved in music. And myself, I couldn't pull myself back in there because I realized the relationship that I had to it before was one of arrogance, chasing money, the whole thing. So I couldn't do it. And I had a friend one day call me. I had 2 separate friends call me. And these guys didn't even know each other. And they had dreams. They had dreams that I was making music and I was inspiring people. And I'm listening to these guys are not religious guys. So they're talking about inspiration to come even out of their mouth was like craziness. And so I'm looking at everything that's going on in my life. And still inside, I can't pull myself to touch music again. Shortly after this, my son, he was 4 months old. He got sick, and we ended up having to take him to the hospital. We went to the hospital maybe 4 or 5 times, and the doctors told us they didn't know what was going on. Each day we're coming back, and he has a fever. The fever won't go away, And my wife, just like any good mother, she does her own research, right? And I remember the last time we went to the doctor, she says, please, can you do a spinal tap? And he said, oh, we don't really think it's something so serious. Just go back or whatever. She's saying he has a fever for 5 days. Please do a spinal tap. So sure enough, they listened after she forced him. And they did a spinal tap, and they found that it was meningitis. And so we were completely shocked and scared and afraid out of my wife. I remember the first time when they came back with the news, my wife got up. She said, woo, I knew it was something. And I'm thinking to her, I said, hon, it's meningitis. This is not what I'm saying? And she's like, it's meningitis. She's thinking to herself, she's so excited because she found something. But now we're thinking that this is something that could possibly take our kid's life, or if not, do some type of damage. So I remember being in the hospital with my wife and her being there and looking at my baby boy. It was so hard for me. Any parent knows that looking at your child and them being in pain and you can't do anything about it is like the deepest torture that you could possibly feel. So I remember going back home because they wouldn't let me stay with my daughter who was older. And I remember putting her to sleep, and I went to go talk to Hashem. Now by this time I'd become very, very accustomed to the books of Rabbi Shalom Arush. And one of the things that he says in one of his books, he talks about the power of talking to Hashem for 6 hours straight. So I went home, I put my daughter to bed, and I went to go talk to God for 6 hours, right? And by the 5th hour, I was out of there. I fell asleep, right? But I davened with so much hidlavus, so much passion that was coming out of my. I just mamish, I plopped. I went to sleep in the 5th hour. It was from all the pain and everything that was going on. And I know what happened after I remember waking up, and it was just heavy on me. You know, sometimes you get those emotional, you know, whatever it is that a person was thinking about or something that happened that was current. It was on me very fresh. And what was in my head at that time was music. And I started to think about these calls, this weird conversation I had with these two friends about music and what was going on with my wife. She was also starting to encourage me at this time. I remember stopping and I told Hashem, I said, God, if it's music you want me to make, if you want me to go back to music, I have a microphone and it's been broken for some time. Everybody knew that was close to me. My brother-in-law who I made music with, it was very confirmed this microphone did not work. And I told Hashem, I said, if you want me to return to music, then you have to make this microphone work. I need a miracle. That's the only thing that I'm going to take. So I remember after I was done praying, I went and I dusted off my old gear. I plugged up this microphone and it worked. Mamish worked. And I told Hashem, thank you, but never mind, it already works. You know, whatever. Joking. But after that, no, I was very, very scared. I was still scared. And I went to go talk to my Rabbi. I became really close to a rabbi, Rabbi Shmuel Brody in Seattle. He's a congregational rabbi now of Shrechem Yisrael. I went and talked to him about it. And he lectured me for 2 hours straight before he would give me reshut, going back into music. Shortly after this also too, I would never talk to two rabbis usually. If I went to my rabbi, I would go to my rabbi and that was it. But I was so petrified, so scared, like I said, of returning back to music because of my former relationship with it. I went to also talk to Rabbi Glaser Brody. And after talking to Rabbi Glaser Brody, and I talked to the other Rabbi Brody, I think I was Brody to go do this, you know. And I felt with myself that I should return, but at the same time I felt very scared. So I remember recording a record, and all that I knew before that time was all that I knew before in the non-Jewish world. I wasn't connected at all to Jewish music or the Jewish world or whatever. I listened to Jewish music, but I didn't know how anything worked. I didn't know people or whatever. But I always had this dimyon, I guess, to some degree, that if I kept my music very positive and uplifting, I would inspire many people as long as I don't say anything about God or like Judaism or anything like that. So time went on. We ended up finishing the record. And I signed with the local record label. We released it. We put it out. I went through all the channels of promotion and PR and all those different things. And for some reason, nobody bid on it in the secular world at all. And there was one email that went out from a brother-in-law of mine, went to H.com, and H loved it. And before you know it, more and more press started to happen in the Jewish world. And I was paying for the non-Jewish press, but the Jewish press was taking off. It became a phenomenon. I guess there was something about, being black or something was very, very intriguing, right? So this starts to spread more and more in the Jewish world. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I put my whole effort and everything into this album, and like I'm watching it, everything I put my effort over here, but Hashem is like doing his own thing over here. And I remember I got to a place where I got so involved in my voda and coming close to Hashem, like that was all I was thinking about at this time. I went to Uman for Rosh Hashanah, I came back, I was so full of light, and like I just want to serve God. This is all I want to do, right? And the more and more I started thinking about music, it started to fade again, this love and this passion to do music. And I got a call one day from a good friend of mine named Elon Krohn. He called me, and he asked me, he said, have you ever heard of this song named Hashem Elech? So I said, yeah, I heard of the song. I mean, obviously, my 2-year-old won't let me play any other song in the house. So I said, of course, I heard of the song. He said, got Elbaz? I said, yeah, I know his music. I have his music. He said, would you do a remix to Hashem Elech? I said, sure, I do it. He said, okay, I'm going to call you back. He got off the phone. And he calls me back maybe 5 minutes later. He said, okay, I talked to God Elbaz. We're going to do this. So they send me these files. And I remember getting the files. It was to the original Hashem Elech. I remember going into the studio, putting everything together. And I'm sitting there and I start writing and I'm thinking like, I always thought that, rapping about God or rapping about Judaism or talking about these type of things in my song would diminish who I am or diminish my skills or diminish the effect that I would be able to have on people. So I'm thinking, with the chorus like Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem, I just don't know what else I could talk about on this song. I was trapped into a corner. So I remember after finishing the lyrics for the song and sitting there in the studio, I started crying. Because for the first time, I felt like I was so free. That when I went into the studio and I was able to write the raps that I was I felt so free and so like alive after I finished the song. So after this, we went to other producers that I knew in Seattle. We gave them the track, whatever, they reworked it. And I remember some time later, we started talking about doing a video. Guy got back, he really loved what I did to the track. And we started talking about a video. And he had mentioned to me in the midst of our conversation that the song was originally an Arab song. It was an Arab tune. Now, for me, myself, I'm thinking to myself, like, first off, I haven't listened. By this time, it had been years already. I've listened to non-Jewish music at all. But Klaus, I don't listen to it. So when I heard that he told me this, I for sure wasn't about taking non-Jewish songs and then turning them into that was something I was very against. Principle-wise, I didn't like it, and I didn't want to do it. So after he told me this, so I'm thinking to myself, man, I loved what I did to the song. It was so great. And I said, but it goes against my principle. So I went out to go talk to Hashem. I was standing on a dock in Seward Park, and I remember looking at the water, going back and forth, most beautiful dock, and I'm thinking to myself, Hashem, what do I do? I already did this song. I felt like I committed to it, but it's this type of song, and I don't feel like I feel very strongly that that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. So while I was sitting there on that dock, I thought of a Torah that I heard from Rabbi Nachman, that I read inside of Lekutei Moharan, that he said it's very good to sing the nigunim of the nations that are afflicting the Jewish people. He says that when a person sings these nigunim, they go up to Shemayim and they cause Yeshua for Klal Yisrael. When you sing these nigunim. So when I heard this like Torah coming in my head, I thought immediately, no longer is it that maybe I should do the song, not do the song, whatever. It's not right. I have to sing the song. I have to go and do the song. At this time, my financial state was completely horrific. I'm telling you, horrible. I was working for a kollel. I didn't know where my next dollar was going to come from. Outside of that, Baruch Hashem is a very, very beautiful kollel there, and they did the best that they could. But ultimately, I needed much more money to be able to survive, and it wasn't working for me, and my back was against the wall. I was a month behind on my rent. When they sent in the tickets, they sent over the tickets to go shoot the video. I went to New York to go shoot this video. I didn't have a dime in my pocket, right? But inside, I'm on fire knowing that I have to go and do this song. I have to go and do this. So I got into New York. I met with God, met with the rest of the crew. We went out there. We started recording and the whole thing. And I got to the third verse when we went to go shoot this part. It was in the middle of the street. It was daytime. And I remember starting with my verse. And this is for the first time. I never felt this before when I rapped ever in my life. There were chills running through my body, going back and forth. And I had such adrenaline that I never felt before any time I performed. And I remember after I was done doing this, feeling inside like, this is what I need to be doing. I have to be doing this. Is my craft. Now, before I was already thinking, maybe I'm just going to go serve God. I'm going to do my own thing. But this is the first time that I'm feeling like this is my contribution to the world. This is it. And I remember coming back home. And now by this time, we're maybe 2 months behind on rent and everything like that. I told my wife, like, what happened to me when I was shooting that third verse and what I felt and everything, and that I felt like this is what I need to be doing. I have to go out here and I need to go focus. This is why we're struggling. This is why it is. I'm not answering what Hashem wants me to do. She says, no, we're struggling because you don't have a job. No. Don't have enough money. This is the problem. Not because you're not, all right? So I'm telling them, I'm so passionate about this. I have to go and do this. And she's like, no, you're crazy. What are you doing? You need 7 jobs, not to, So I told my wife. My wife's a very, very spiritual person, by the way. She's very, very spiritual. So I remember ending one of the conversations with her. And I said to her like this. I said, all right, this is what I feel. I said, at least do this. You go talk to Hashem about it. You go speak to Hashem about it. That's how we ended the conversation. One day she came to me, and she said to me, what do dreams mean? And I said to her, they don't mean anything. They don't mean nothing. According to Kabbalah, depends maybe what time of night you fell asleep, that whole thing or whatever. But I said, I don't know. Ultimately, I don't know if they mean anything and don't mean anything. I said, why? She said, oh, no. So I had already learned when I was a young kid that if you want the truth from anybody, you have to ask them when they're halfway asleep, you know what I mean? Like right when they're almost asleep. You want a yes from your parents or whatever. I'm telling you, giving you guys gems here. You have to ask them when they're halfway asleep, almost out, whatever. That's when you get the real answer. So I waited to the middle of the night, and my wife's like dozing off. And I said, hon, you said that you had a dream. What was the dream? And she's like, don't run with this. She said, but after we had that conversation, I went and I talked to Hashem. And she said, after that night, I fell asleep. And she said, I had a dream that you were on this massive stage, you were before people, and you were giving people so much chizik, so much fire was coming from you on the stage and everything that you were doing, that it was so real to her. She felt it inside the dream. And she said that it happened after I had this conversation. I was talking to Hashem about this or whatever. So after that, I remember going back. I quit my job at the kollel. And I remember the reason why is because every time I went to go open a pamphlet, I open a book, there's a beautiful story that Rav Arush tells about himself, that it happened to him several times, or it happened to him one time, but he wrote it in several different places of his books. And I would pick up different books. And every time he would write there that he was in a major crisis financially, right? And what he did, instead of going to go get a job, like everybody told him to do, he went to go talk to Hashem like an 8-hour schedule. He would go talk to Hashem every single day. And from that, he received his Yeshua. So I quit the job over there. I went out every single day. I talked to Hashem for 6 hours every day. For 22 days, that's what I did with my life. That was my work schedule. I didn't do anything else. My wife supported me completely when I went to go do this. On day 17, I remember coming out of the forest of Sewer Park. And my phone started ringing, and it was a call from God Elbaz. And I answered the phone, whatever, and this is Hashem Melech comes out, and I'm halfway in on what's going on, and halfway out, whatever. I don't really know what's going on. This time, even at my house, I didn't have internet. So he called me, and he says to me, Achi, we made a hit. And I'm like, Shkoyach, what are you talking about? So he says, we made a hit. And he's telling me everything that's happening with Hashem Melech or whatever. So if anybody didn't know what was going on at that time, not only did it affect the Jewish community, but it also affected even the Christian world, everything. And that song ended up being number 3 on iTunes. Number 3 in the world charts on iTunes. This song happened. Hashem Melech. And almost immediately after that, maybe 2 days after that came out, I started getting calls from communities all over the world to come in Machazik communities all over the world. This all happened from this one song. And from that, obviously, things took a dramatic change, Baruch Hashem, finally. And I started to think, as the emails will come in after we made the song and everything that was coming on from the song, I started to get emails from people, particularly from young boys who were teenage boys, teenage age or whatever, and they would tell me that you don't understand how this song saved me. I was on the brink of leaving my Yiddishkeit. I felt like there was nothing to do with Judaism anymore. And this song gave them so much chiyus, made them feel that the Yiddishkeit was cool again. From one song. And on top of many different other emails from that. And I later on was told this is an amazing thing. I told you this whole thing about singing the Agunim of the nations that afflicting Jewish people causes Yeshuot and all these different things. And I'm starting to see people are writing in the Yeshuot from hearing a song of me dancing around in Manhattan. I have no idea how it happened, right? And somebody said to me, he said, this is very funny. As I told him the story, he says, because Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimloch is Gematria Mashiach. Gematria Mashiach. And by singing such a song, we didn't think of anything whatever that we're able to start bringing Yeshua. That because of the power of music, being able to see people give so much chizik, give so much life for something that you could be doing. Baruch Hashem, I want to thank all of you. That's my story. My name is Nissim Black. Appreciate all of you.